That's right, we are using this. All right. Hello, refiners.
Welcome to this week's episode of Neurodata Refinement. I'm Kim Young.
And I'm Greg Siegel. We are faculty at the University of Pittsburgh doing a project where we aim to back up people's brains on one day and restore them on another day. Today we want to talk to you about our first big application of this work, which is going to be to depression. We've both worked in depression for
me, it's been probably 15 years.
And for me, it's about 25 years. Depression's hard. Depression is something that affects a lot of the population. The estimates were after COVID, 25 to 30% of the population was either anxious or depressed in the U.S.
Depression is notoriously difficult to treat. The top-of-the-line treatments only work for around half of the individuals that try them, and most people don't stay in remission. Most people will relapse within a couple of years.
Yeah, we did a big study where we gave people the best possible treatments, and they did get better, and then their quality of life was just really compromised over the next many years. So what we're looking to do is say, what can we do to get in there for depressions which we know are coming and depressions we don't know are coming? If we have somebody who's vulnerable to depression, could we back them up when they're in an okay state and then restore their brain when they get depressed?
And there's been so many studies that have looked at predicting who is going to become depressed before they become depressed. So we have all this data out there suggesting who we could be targeting, but nobody's really developed any interventions. We've just been able to say, hey, yeah, you have a high chance of becoming depressed. So in this way, when we tell somebody that, we could say, well, and we can back up your brain so that if you do become depressed, we can restore it.
The obvious candidates, something like seasonal depressions, the people who get depressed every winter, we could back them up in the summer when they're feeling great and try and restore them in the winter. Postpartum depression happens really quite often. We could back somebody up before they have their kid, and then afterward, if they become depressed. So many of my postpartum people tell me, I don't even remember who I was. I can't imagine how I could have lived a life without depression. Well, we can maybe show you.
PMDD as well. You know reliably that when you cycle, you'll be getting depressive episodes. So we could back somebody up on their third week of their cycle, and then bring them back in the fourth week of their cycle and restore them and see if that kind of reduces their depression that they're experiencing.
And one of the most exciting applications that we've just really been thinking about recently is first episodes, because it turns out the best predictor of future depressions is having been depressed in the past. We think there's a scar. Pete Lewinson in the 1970s actually said, we think depression somehow scars you. It changes your brain to be more likely to be able to slip back into that depressed state. If we were to back you up before your first episode of depression, if you were in a vulnerable group potentially, could we, as soon as you start to get depressed, make it so your brain doesn't cement in those tracks that will let you get depressed in the future? So there's the potential. What are we going to use for it? This week, we were super excited to have one of our primary restoration technologies arrive at the lab. Arrives in a big suitcase.
Giant suitcase. It was really exciting. It's transcranial alternating current stimulation.
And so you might have heard of brain stimulation. They do implanted brain stimulation for depression. Transcranial direct current stimulation is all the rage, where we take some EEG nodes and we actually did it with 2 sponges and a 9-volt back in the day, and put them over your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which helps you regulate emotion, and just pump some juice in there with the hope that it fires more often. We've done studies with transcranial magnetic stimulation before, again over these frontal areas, hoping to juice them up a bit. And that was a fun study we did. We were trying to increase reward response, and we did it to me. We did the stimulation to my prefrontal cortex, and they asked me if I felt any different, and I said no, and somebody said, what are you doing? And on one hand, I was programming a computer. With my other hand, I was correcting a budget on a grant, and I was talking to somebody about the grant submission process as I was doing these two things and not even thinking about it. And it just boosted capacity. But what it doesn't do is restore specific patterns of brain activity, brain waves at specific frequencies.
Yeah, it's good at turning large sections of the brain on or off, but not really modulating.
Transcranial alternating current stimulation says if we have a brain frequency of a brain wave that we think is interesting, we could beam that into specific places. So ideally, what we'd be doing this with is the whole head, and that's what we're preparing to do in this study. For our very, very first foray, though, we said, let's just try one area, which we know is important. Now, Kim and I have both studied positive emotion for many years. Positive emotion often is a function of dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's anticipation of reward chemical. So when you think good things are going to happen, it's big infusions of dopamine. If you inject dopamine into a snail, you get 40 times a second activity, which we call gamma activity in the snail's brain. When people do exciting things, when they are getting rewards, when they're anticipating rewards, you get this gamma oscillation. We think that it has to do with reward anticipation, with reward function, and with dopamine. So we've measured gamma oscillations throughout the head, and when people are excited, we tend to get a bunch of gamma in the back. I've measured athletes doing extreme things. We get a whole bunch of that parietal gamma. We did a whole big study on sexual stimulation. We got a lot of gamma. We even did studies with what people called orgasmic meditation, hundreds of people doing that, and it was a lot of this parietal gamma stuff. You've done actually neurofeedback.
Yeah, so for the past decade, I've been doing neurofeedback with patients with depression, and we have them in the scanner and learning how to control a brain signal in real time while they recall positive autobiographical memories, so memories about things that have happened to them in their life. And we got a really interesting finding was that all of our men kept reporting these really high arousal activities that were effective at increasing their brain activity. So things like skydiving or parachuting or sex, but all these really high arousal activities. And it was really kind of restricted to the men. The women tended to find more social interactions to be to be effective at raising their brain activity.
Yeah. So high arousal gamma, we don't think it might not work for everybody, but it's just where the men went to naturally.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about whether they're more socially limited or not. So what we thought of is, can we beam some parietal gamma in and just see what happens as a first pass? It was the first thing we did. We unboxed the thing. The representative from the vendor came, said, what would you like to try? And we said parietal gamma. So what we did is we took a brain model and we traced out that parietal area, and we projected that back onto the cortex and found the electrodes that we would need to stimulate to get parietal activity. And we said, let's put 40 times a second activity into those. We made a little paradigm to do it, where we had a ramp up, and then we would have 40 times a second activity for a while, then we would have a rest, and then we'd do 40 times a second activity again in that area, and then we would rest again. And because we have recorded Kim before, we decided Kim would actually try this and be our first candidate. Anything could have happened. We could have burned Kim's head. She could have had a really bad time. She could have gotten really high arousal, upset and angry at me and stopped the study. But we were brave and sallied forth.
Yeah. And we also, while we were doing this, we kept track of my mood. So I had a little mouse, and I basically just moved with the mouse to indicate how happy or how unhappy I was feeling at the moment.
And we didn't necessarily need the mood. This was Kim's face during it. We had EEG on her head, as you can see. And then it was a big grin. And we'll just show what happened here. Whenever we did the parietal gamma stimulation, Kim's mood went up. When we stopped, her mood went back down. Stimulation again, mood went up. We stopped, mood went back down. Do you want to talk about your experience with that?
Yeah, so the first thing was that, what was my first experience with TACS, and they warned me but that I would have some feeling in my head that it might feel like tingling or itching, and that was the first thing I noticed, was that my scalp started to itch a lot. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was just noticeable, and so that was kind of that way I knew stuff was going to my head. And then I really, it's hard to describe. It was almost like I felt elevated. I felt uplifted while I was having the gamma stimulation, and I could feel, yeah, I just felt my mood. I felt lighter, I guess would be the way to describe it. I felt lighter. And then when they turned it off, I could almost immediately feel a little bit drop back down. And then when they turned it back on, it was just, light again. It was like, it was just an moment. But it did come down right after, when the stimulation was off. It was really dependent on the stimulation, but something I've noticed in the past couple of days since I've done this is that I've been in a better mood. Now, it could be because we got to play with a new toy and it was successful and I'm just riding that high right now, but it also could be these lasting effects of the gamma stimulation. Just this really brief protocol seemed to, for a couple of days at least, made me in a better mood, in a happier place.
Yeah, so the only bit of information I can give you on this, and again, it's not the studies that I usually talk about, but when we did do these sex studies, we found these big bouts of gamma before orgasm. Afterward, when people came back down, we still found big bouts of gamma going on and on for hours after. I can imagine if we stimulated with gamma, even if your mood had a bit of a downturn afterward, having
Gamma
residual
was still
effects of that, you slotted into a brain state and you have been there. Let me ask, have you had any rewarding experiences that you're anticipating in the last couple of days?
That I was
good,
anticipating?
Yeah, or good things that
Oh,
are
yeah,
about to happen.
there are a lot of good things about to happen, but I also had a friend visiting, and we went downtown and got a great dinner, and it was a lot of fun.
And when you were thinking about, we're going to go downtown now, was that maybe, I don't want to lead the question too much, but how did it feel? Were you actively anticipating?
Anticipation, yeah. I was definitely feeling a heightened anticipation. Again, I don't know how much I can attribute to the stimulation study and just the great things that have been happening this week.
Yeah, and what I would say, many of us have been having a more anxious time this week, so that you had this was lovely. And my belief is that you might have been having a more anxious time leading up to this week, where it was actually somewhat harder to engage with some positive things.
No, that's absolutely true. I do have the surgery coming up, and that does, I am nervous about that, and, some of the things going on in the world have me stressed out. Things at work, things in the world, it's just, I would agree with that.
So that you're sitting around anticipating positive things, I'm going to call that a win.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think last week I probably would not have been anticipating things and just dreading things.
Yeah. So that's exciting. And again, you were not a depressed person. If you're a depressed person, we're going to see, can we get on in there and do something for you? We're going to be backing up people's actual brains rather than just stimulating with something that we think is interesting. But as a first test, that was great. We actually did one more test. And this is just a
lot of fun.
Yeah, this is kind of crazy fun. And the power of brain stimulation, which is, we had all these electrodes right in the front of your head. And I said, what if we turn them on at about 10 times a second, right around your eyes? What was the result?
Well, so I was even worried. Like, what did you say?
Phosphenes.
Phosphenes. I was told I was going to see phosphenes, and so I was ready for something to happen. But the second it turned on, it was just the lights were flashing all around me. It was like I was at a dance club or a show at Disney. It was flickering, and it was so strong and so powerful. And the second they turned it off, it stopped. And then they put some random noise into the same location, and it didn't happen. It was really specific to the alpha frequency, and it was a party in my head, and it was great. It was a lot of fun, and it was really cool to see just these really dramatic effects with this technology.
So this is technology that changes your actual perception of the world, changes how you see the world, both emotionally, and it can actually affect how you see things.
Yeah, and we did this a couple days ago, and I have had no adverse effects from it. Like I said, it itched, but it wasn't painful. It didn't bother me. I didn't have any lasting effects. So I would say I have no side effects from this, and that's been great too.
That's great, and something that Kim and I have always been very strong about is we just don't do experiments on other people that we won't do on ourselves.
Yep, we always try our own experiments first.
One other thing before we go today we wanted to tell you about, which is that we are going to be doing all the stimulation. Last time we showed you vibration to affect Kim's mood by changing her heart rate variability. We showed you today what we're doing with this transcranial alternating current stimulation. We're also going to be letting people just try and do some of this stuff themselves using neurofeedback.
Yeah, so I've spent the past decade doing neurofeedback in an fMRI scanner, and one of the key reasons people think that this is effective, that it makes people feel better, is because of this enhanced self-efficacy. It's not just that we're doing something to you, we're giving you a drug, we're telling you what to do. You're learning what works for you, what makes these brain regions come online. And I think that's really the key to why we see these really long-lasting effects with neurofeedback. In one of our more recent studies, when we combined it with CBT, a year later, the people who got the neurofeedback were much more likely to be in remission. And so I think that really this learning what works for you, what's effective, and I think when we combine it with the technology, we stimulate you so you get into that state and you see what techniques are effective at keeping you in that state. I think that will boost the effects and make them last longer.
Absolutely. So the hope is that people don't need this kind of stimulation through their life, that they learn what it is that will keep them in a positive state.
Yeah.
And we're just helping slot them into that with some tech so they can get there and say, wow, that's the goal, that's the target, that's where I want to get to.
Yeah, we're not going to ask people to wear EEG hats on their head for the rest of their lives. We just want to give them the experience, and hopefully once they learn what that feels like, they're able to do it on their own.
Well, so again, another exciting week in the journey that is this study. We'll say we have some people who might be interested in licensing patents on this stuff. We have some people who might be interested in helping us do this study. So things are, from our perspective, I think, going real well.
Yeah, they really are. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah. So refiners, tune in next time. You can get this episode. You can see the data again from Kim's time with the transcranial alternating current stimulation on our website, and you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we're going to be setting up something so you can start asking us some questions too, because we would love to be answering your questions as we go forward.
Yeah, and this will be the last podcast we do before my surgery.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. So when we come back, we'll see that we'll be starting to look at trying to restore me.
Yeah. Good luck with that, and we hope it goes really well, and if it doesn't, we'll be here for you.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time.